Welcome back to my channel. My name's Gio, and I write gay fiction for fun. The previous part of this story is called Forbidden Need, and I recommend you listen to that one first. It's all about Mark, a graduate student who is teaching painting to undergraduate students. He has fallen in love with Phil, one of his students. The problem? Even though both Mark and Phil are adults, if Mark acts on his feelings, he could be quietly released from the university before he receives his diploma and his degree. Once again, thank you to the person who wishes to remain anonymous, who suggested the idea for this story. And now, Forbidden Desire. For 2 weeks, Phil and I met every weekday for lunch, and each time my gut did flip-flops. I knew I shouldn't see him every day, be a friend every day, listen to him every day, fall in love with him every day. In a couple of weeks, he'd turn in his final portfolio, and we'd discuss it. I'd give him his grade for his portfolio and for the class, and then he would leave. I'd never see him again after that. Phil's a senior, and with his talent, it wouldn't take long to find a job anywhere in the country. I had a different problem. When it came to grading, could I be objective about him? Could I give him a lower grade if he deserved it? We had become friends, maybe even close friends in the last 2 weeks. What if Phil didn't have enough of his work to create an overview of his time in my class, of what he had learned and how he had evolved as an artist? Everything about his work suggested A material. But if Phil somehow didn't meet the requirements, could I be strong enough to give him a lower grade? I could talk to Dr. Andrews about this, but I think he already suspected I was seeing a student on the side. Phil and I hadn't done anything except have lunch and hold hands. We hadn't kissed or dated. Would Andrew see it that way? Of course he wouldn't. Seeing Phil as often as I did was wrong. We walked back to the art building, casual and joking, and up to the grad studio to grab our things for class. Brandon was in the room, working on a mixed media painting that involved real barbed wire. "Ow, God almighty," he yelled, and quickly sucked on his thumb. "You should wear gloves," Phil said. "Brandon likes pain," I said. The other grad students had figured out that Phil and I met for lunch, supposedly to talk about his art. If they suspected that I had feelings for him, they didn't say anything. "You two are funny," Brandon said. "There's a box of Band-Aids on my desk. Grab me one, would you?" I passed him a Band-Aid. If I had known how hard it was working with real barbed wire, I would have painted it instead, Brandon said. "You two hear the news?" "What news?" I said, picking up the box with my supplies for today's class. "Beat 'em up Eaton let it slip in class today, and we're having a party. I guess it's been a secret for months, so nobody knew except the dean and his staff," Brandon said. "Nobody knew what?" Phil asked. "Get this. She got a job as a comic book artist, and this was her final semester," Brandon said. "She's in her 40s or 50s. Aren't comic book artists in their 20s or something?" Phil said. "But she can draw people like nobody else can," Brandon said. "She quits in 2 weeks? I didn't think this place could keep a secret," I said. "She submits her grades at the end of finals week, goes on vacation to the Bahamas the next week, and moves to Los Angeles the week after that," Brandon said. "It gets better." Misha walked in, giving me and Phil a quick glance. "You are right. It gets a lot better. They have to find someone to take her summer semester. They don't have many applicants yet. The dean is opening the position so even a grad student who gets his master's degree this semester can apply. That means one of us could get a full-time faculty position before we graduate. Mark, you should apply, Phil said. You are a lot nicer than Dr. Eaton, and cuter too. Brandon let loose a string of swear words. Whether it was at the barbed wire or us, I couldn't say. Pass me another Band-Aid. Misha rolled her eyes. The best woman for the job has already applied, so you don't need to bother. That lets you out, Brandon said. Misha flipped him off and turned to her desk. As Phil and I walked down the corridor to class, he said, I'm serious. You should apply. Why? I asked. It's nice to have someone around here who cares about the students, Phil said, and took my hand. It's nice to have someone around here who cares about me. Thanks. Phil was right. Teaching was my dream. The staff already knew me and knew my work. I could become a teacher this semester and become a permanent part of this faculty. Wait until I tell my parents. Phil gave me a shy kiss on the cheek, and he quickly stepped away and looked down. Our first kiss. I had two simultaneous reactions. A gnawing panic ate through my heart. What if one of the other teachers saw, or word got back to the dean somehow? Would I be fired and never get my degree? The other reaction. A growing smile. I couldn't keep a straight face during class. What am I, 12 years old? I called my family and asked their opinion about the job. They immediately approved. They couldn't believe it. Me, a professor in college. I'm only 25, not 50. I'll barely have my master's degree. I couldn't believe it. The application process came in 4 parts. An online application, a hard copy handwritten application that required an essay about why I wanted to teach at this university, a background check, and last, a tag team interview with the dean of the art department, the associate dean of the registrar's office, a woman from human resources, and my mentor teacher, Dr. Andrews. Not one-on-one. It was all of them against me. The interview happened in the conference room next to the art department dean's office, and the butterflies in my stomach had learned to do cartwheels. Too bad I had eaten today, because my stomach refused to settle down. The interview lasted an hour and included a review of my resume, a comprehensive review of my portfolio. They asked a lot of questions, but there were only 2 issues I remembered. My only concern is that your portfolio is rather light on figure studies, and assuming we choose you, that's what we'll be asking you to teach, the dean of the art department said. Landscapes are Mark's specialty, but I'm sure he could diversify, Dr. Andrews said. If we select you, you'll have to, the dean said. I feel that is a secondary concern. Mark, you'll have 3 weeks to create the 12-week curriculum and syllabus for summer semester and submit it for approval. Do you feel you can do it? The associate dean of the registrar's office said. I can modify what I'm doing right now, I said. The associate dean didn't smile, but leaned on the table and gave me a hard stare. Those standards are fine for undergrads who only need to earn a few elective credits, or for beginning art students, but Dr. Eaton's replacement will also work with juniors and seniors, specializing with life drawing skills. Eventually, you'll instruct graduate students. I'll ask again, can you prepare for that? I can, I replied. I'll talk to Dr. Eaton before she leaves and see what she recommends. They whispered among themselves for an intense 3 minutes, leaving me sitting in the chair, watching the clock hands rotate. I don't think I gave the answers they wanted. Thank you, Mark. We've enjoyed the interview and seeing your portfolio. We look forward to seeing your work at the Graduate Art Show. As to the job, we'll get back to you as soon as we've spoken with the other applicants," the woman from Human Resources said. The next day, at lunch, I told Phil all that had happened. "You'll get it," Phil said. "I don't think I impressed them," I said. "But they need nice teachers. Name one who is anywhere near as nice as you," Phil said. "Dr. Eaton, you won't believe this. Though her presentation skills suck and she has the worst personality, I think she actually cares," I said. "In her teeny tiny refrigerator of a heart," Phil said. "You might need an electron microscope to find it, but I think it's there," I said, taking a bite of another fry. Phil nodded a little and smiled. He pinched his fingers together as if measuring the tiny heart. Somebody snorted near us and got up. "Dr. Ellie Eaton." Oops. 1 week later, since I hadn't heard anything about the teaching position, I assumed I didn't get it. Phil and I met every weekday for lunch. Time varied depending on his class load or my teaching schedule. Each day I worked on the paintings for the art show. I had my earbuds in, humming with the song, and thought I was alone, when somebody tapped me on the shoulder. I turned and looked, taking my earbuds out. Phil had brought me lunch. "Hey, good looking," I said, rewarding him with a smile. "Hey, sexy," he said, setting our lunches carefully on my desk so it wouldn't disturb anything. "I like it," and he nodded toward my newest painting. A lighthouse stood on a lonely cliff with a wild sea around it. I had taken the original picture years ago when I had been on a family trip. It was a beautiful place in Maine, a little northeast of the coastal town of Ash Hollow. The lighthouse and surrounding buildings were on the edge of Cape Sodhurst. Near the edge of the cliff stood 2 small figures silhouetted in the red and gold clouds. The scene was a sunrise, just minutes before the sun rose. I had used a 10-aught brush, the smallest one I had, to paint the 2 tiny men holding hands. They were supposed to be me and Phil. I had taken the original picture at noon, but I had changed it to a sunrise so I could get the glorious dawn colors in the sky. "Do you think we could go there sometime?" Phil asked, standing behind me and wrapping his arms around me. "It's a 3-day drive if we pushed it, or 4 if we took our time," I said, "or a few hours if we caught the right tailwind." "Let's take our time," Phil said, eyes shining, lips parting. A slight smile flashed briefly. The moment was right. We were alone. Our lips met, tentatively touching, awkward, a little nervous as our mouths figured each other out. It was a light tangle of lips, a soft whisper of his breath with mine, a light tickle as our tongues met, a beautiful, gentle release of the loneliness in my heart. Our second kiss. This was wrong. I knew it. But I didn't care. For a minute, I was happy. Phil was too. I pulled his collar low and kissed my way to his neck. His skin was warm and tasted slightly of salt, and he smelled of warm sandalwood. Phil leaned back, letting my lips play on his shoulder, his neck. He whispered, "Mark," and closed his eyes. A slow breath left his lips, and he shuddered. "Mark, don't stop," eased out of his lips. I returned to his mouth, and our lips joined as one. Phil pushed me against the wall, his hand rubbing my side, his mouth strong with need. His lips parted. This was wrong. Phil was my student. This was very wrong. So why did being with Phil make me so happy? We broke apart, our foreheads leaning together, our lips wet, and we were breathing hard. "I love you," I whispered. What had I admitted? We'd only been seeing each other for a couple of weeks. It was the truth. But I was his teacher. Phil teased me with a dozen light kisses on my mouth, and he giggled, and laughed. Phil flirted with a smile and said, "Same here, sexy." "I like this painting better than your other ones," a woman's voice said, softly closing the door behind her. "It shows more fire, more life than the others." The door clicked shut. She locked it. Dr. Eaton was here? She had seen us kissing? My heart turned to ice and broke in half. My career was over, and I had never even graduated. She had seen me kissing Phil. She knew he was a student. What had I done? From the other side of the door came two voices, Brandon's and Misha's. "Why did beat-em-up Eaton want to talk to Mark?" Misha said, something dark about her tone. "Probably his grades, or give him pointers about his new job," Brandon said. "They chose Mr. Boring over me?" Misha asked. "The illustrious Miss Wrapping Paper? Get over yourself. I hope whatever they're talking about doesn't take long, because I have a new idea with barbed wire I want to try," Brandon said. "And some thicker gloves." Phil and I stepped apart. Phil quickly adjusted his shirt. A severe blush flushed his cheeks. I think I went the other, paler direction, because my stomach froze. Dr. Eaton had caught me and Phil making out? "I can explain," I blurted out, feeling the guilt shroud my body like a million fire ants. I'm sorry you heard what Misha said." "That part, the beat-em-up stuff," Phil said, glancing at me and then at the ground. Dr. Eaton walked towards my painting and bent to examine it. "This painting shows heart," Dr. Eaton said, staring first at me, then at Phil. "Look at the delicacy of the brushstrokes, especially around the figures. I think any couple who sees this will see themselves as the couple on the cliff. This time, you have painted with passion, and this work displays your naked soul. It asks a question. Do you aim for the clouds and fly, or remain immortal, trapped on the ground? I think we can all guess who has woken you." Phil bit his lip and looked at me. Maybe he realized the kind of trouble I could be in. It didn't matter. I took his hand in mine and smiled at him. "Don't worry," I said. Dr. Eaton glanced at our hands and nodded. She let a small smile escape, and then turned to the large canvases I had been working on and pulled one out. "This isn't you," she said. "Or if it is, it's about a man who is too afraid of letting others see him. He's the mortal trapped on the ground. I think that somebody," and she glanced at Phil, "broke down the walls you hid behind, and your true self is coming out." She put the 5-foot canvas back. "Some people work better on a large scale and play for the crowd's approval. Not you. You work better on a smaller, more intimate scale, for an audience of one, for the approval of someone you love and who loves you." "Ma'am," I said. "That took me decades to learn," Dr. Eaton said. "When I first started teaching, I used to care. Over the last year, I realized that I hated my job. I had become the woman with a heart so small it needed an electron microscope to be seen." "I'm sorry I said that," I said. "Don't be sorry for the truth," she said. "I've become cynical and mean, and I never meant to be. Some advice. Be this person." Dr. Eaton pointed at my newest painting, the one of the lighthouse on the cliff with the dawn sky. "And not this person." She pointed at the 5-foot canvas with the boring sky. "I'll try," I said. "I like the person you're evolving into," she said, and headed toward the door. "Ma'am," I said, "about me and Phil?" "I think he is your solution," she said, unlocked the door, and left. "Did you understand that?" Phil asked. I looked again at the small painting, squinting at the details I had included, the play of light across the buildings, the way the figures held hands. It wasn't a large picture, only 12 inches by 15 inches, but it was small enough that I could control the detail. I looked again at the large canvas. Dr. Eaton was right. It was on a scale too big for me to handle. "Thank you for bringing me back to life," I whispered to Phil, and kissed him. 2 days later, right after my afternoon class, I was in the grad studio working on my new, smaller paintings. Brandon was at his desk, cutting bits of barbed wire, and Misha was at hers, cleaning her airbrush. My phone rang. The secretary of the Dean of Fine Arts office had called. "We want to schedule you for a second interview. Can you make it Thursday at 11? "My morning class ends at 11, but I can be there shortly after," I said. "Excellent. I'll let the dean know. Please bring your portfolio, a syllabus for each of the classes you're currently teaching, and prepare a potential syllabus for your Vision of Life Drawing 1, and be prepared to talk about it," she said. "Will it be the same people I interviewed with before?" I asked. "They will be there, but we've also invited Dr. Eaton for her input, and a member of campus security who will review their findings as to the background check," she said. "If you could bring enough copies for 6 people, it will make the process smoother." "How extensive was the background check?" Brandon asked, but the person on the phone thought it was me. "An educational background check is pretty stringent, but it is standard procedure," she said. "Everybody on campus has to go through it, so I wouldn't worry." The call ended. Brandon jumped out of his seat and slapped me on the back. He had Band-Aids on 8 of his fingers. "I can't believe it. A second interview?" "I didn't expect to get this far," I said. "Why would they choose you?" Misha sneered. "All you paint is boring landscapes." "I can paint people," I said. "Since when?" Misha snorted and turned back to her desk. That night, I picked up Phil from his dorm, and we went on our first date. Nothing fancy, not on a grad student's budget. Sushi and beers in the park. We toasted each other and kissed. "I am proud of you," Phil said, "and I know you'll make it." He graduated in a couple of weeks, too. This summer, he wouldn't be my student, and I wouldn't be his teacher. We could date for real. "I have a surprise for you," I said. "You only have to say yes." "Now that sounds serious," Phil said. "Did you know the Lighthouse at Cape Sodhurst is a bed and breakfast? I called and found out prices and their schedule. I know I should have asked, but they had a room available the week after finals. I prepaid. What if we flew up to Bangor, Maine, that Saturday, rented a car, drove the coast, and spent a week in one of the most beautiful places on earth, and flew back the following Saturday?" I said. "It would just be us. Please say yes." "I'm in. I'll even pay half. I bet they have millions of seagulls. I've never swam in the ocean before. Do they have a beach?" Phil whispered. "Next time I call, I'll ask," I whispered. But I don't think Phil heard me, because we sealed our future together with a kiss. Phil pulled back, smiling. "Paint me." "What?" I said. "You have to paint people if you want to teach life painting," Phil said. "You want me to paint a full painting of you in oils tonight?" I said. "Keep it small and intimate. Isn't that what Dr. Eaton said you're good at?" Phil said. "Do you realize what painting from life means?" I asked. "It's not portraits, it's nudes." "I've taken 3 of those classes. Got good grades too. I know what it means," Phil said. I immediately blushed. All my paints are back at the college, in the grad studio. "Then let's go back to the college," he said, bit his lip, smiled, and kissed me. "Except for some evening classes. There's no one there, and no one in the grad studio," Phil said. "Unless Brandon is still fighting with barbed wire," I said. "There is one catch," Phil said, his mouth twitching into a leering smile of pure erotic chaos. "You get 1 hour to paint me, and then I get an hour to paint you." As bad ideas go, this was the worst, most exciting, heart-pounding, terrible, best idea in existence. One that could get me fired. I might only be 2 years older, but I was still Phil's teacher. My gut churned, but I couldn't fight the excitement any longer. One last kiss, and I whispered, "Phil, let's go find our paints." We drove to the university. One advantage for night parking? It's easy to find a parking spot close to anywhere, like the art department. Except for one evening class, the building was empty. We snuck into the grad studio, and I smiled and made sure my shirt hung untucked and hid the evidence of my growing excitement. This painting would need to dry fast. Oils can take days or even a week to dry. I didn't have that time. They dry faster at warmer temperatures, so I adjusted the thermostat upwards a few degrees and got the heat lamp from the cupboard. I still had some special paint medium that cut drying time down. Phil locked the door behind us, and for good measure, he wedged a chair against the door. That little worm of something sexual wound its way around my gut, churning. Was I nervous? Yes. Would this become something intimate? I hope so. Let's call what I was feeling. Anxious, nervous, sexual excitement rolled into an intense longing. I released my breath and tried to relax. I think Phil felt the same way. He couldn't stop smiling. I set my easel up and took one of my smaller canvases and placed it on the easel. Phil took his shirt off, shook his hair a little, and combed it with his fingers. He shifted Brandon's stool over and lay his shirt on it so he didn't have to sit on the cold surface. A small silver hoop hung from each nipple. I was right. They were pierced. I adjusted my stool as Phil kicked off his sandals. I inhaled and held my breath. His body was as incredible as I imagined. "Remember, sexy," Phil said, undoing his khaki shorts and hooking his thumbs in his boxer brief's waistband. "It's my turn to paint you next." His smile was not quite shy, but it was definitely wicked. Was this really happening? I grinned and blew a breath out and got my charcoal pencil ready, and my palette, and my paints, and I grinned, and when was the last time I was this excited? Phil glanced at me, gave me a playful grin, and slid his shorts and boxer briefs off. The door was locked, the building almost empty. Nobody would walk in on us. We're safe. The end of part 2. This is just a quick note for those of you who don't take classes in the art department. Life drawing beginner and advanced, and life painting beginner and advanced aren't portrait classes. Painting from life means drawing and painting nudes from live models. Painting nudes is a normal part of an artist's curriculum and has been for 600 years, or even 4,000 years. Ask Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci and the ancient Greeks. Most art students end up taking 2 to 4 semesters in it. Some students, depending on their focus, take even more classes. If your dream job involves drawing and painting people, the best way to learn is to draw and paint people. Join me next time for the final part, Forbidden Dream. Thanks. Peace.